The Case That Keeps Me Up at Night, Part 9, The Three Deaths, Finale and Epilogue, written by Detvo. The rain eventually stopped and the waters receded, but not before the town was flooded in a way that it never had before. They called it a 1,000-year flood, but not because it had been 1,000 years since the water had gotten this high. The historical records didn't even go back that far, but rather because areas were flooded that had a 0.1% chance of flooding in any given year. The flood was declared a federal disaster. People canoed down Main Street. Homes and businesses were ruined, and 13 people lost their lives. The damage exceeded millions upon millions of dollars. A huge setback and disaster, but not a devastation from which there was no return, as Rudy Knowles would have had us all believe. Maybe this was all just a preview. The real flood was somewhere further down the line. They say that this will be the new normal as global warming makes its slow, unpredictable climb, each year hotter than the last. As for me, I've bought stock in sandbags and inflatable rafts. There was a county about an hour south of here that had a string of deaths in the 90s, murders and suicides. The suicides had been fishy and out of left field. There were notes written in different handwriting. People who had shot themselves in the head, but had the wherewithal to leave little specks of blood all over their house beforehand. The investigations into these were severely lacking. Botched autopsies and inaccurate death certificates. Prime suspects never properly followed up on. Justice had been put on hold. Enough so that there was a grassroots movement to look further into these cases and push for reopening them. It was known as the 11th Commandment. What was the 11th Commandment? Thou shalt not get away with it. Since I've written this all out and posted it, a nagging feeling has returned. I've been spending lots of time on the internet researching and looking into some old files. While I was doing this, something which had almost ruined me before, I kept coming back to the 11th Commandment. I had to make sure that the guilty parties followed it. I thought about what Rudy Knowles had told me he saw from that sewer. Dennis on his jog. Dennis seeing someone he knew. A girl with an eye on the back of her head. A taller blonde girl that was bigger than the boy that she was with. Something suddenly hit me. A hunch. "You look good, man," said Rosh in the Lowe's parking lot. "Thanks, and thank you for doing this. Way I figured it is that the dust is settled and I'm risking a lot less by giving this to you. My only concern is what you are risking by going through all of this. This stuff almost ruined you," Roche said. "It's for a book I'm writing. I've been trying to fictionalize the experience. It's actually been very cathartic." "Well, I'm glad you're doing well," he said as he handed me the yellow folder. Inside was paperwork from the Dennis case and a thumb drive. "You take care. Don't be a stranger now," he said as he left. And there it was. You had to be looking for it. Her hair obscured it for the most part, and the way the photos were set up, your eyes were drawn to other parts of the photo. You could only see about 20% of the actual tattoo. Kayla, the dominatrix girlfriend of Connor Nelson, had on the back of her neck a tattoo of an eye peering from a triangle. Kayla, the true crime aficionado who had a penchant for recording podcasts and audio narrations in her spare time with her boyfriend Connor. Kayla, the gal who had access to various audio recording equipment. Kayla, who had a tattoo that was identical to Lisa, the paralegal that worked at Dennis's firm. They said that they had posted narrations and the like on YouTube. I had no username to go on, but after an hour or two down the rabbit hole of audio narrations, I found it. The video was called True Crime Story: The Disappearance of Dennis. It was by an account known as Creepypasta, and it had 3,000 views. I pressed play. There was a musical score and a narration performed by a female narrator, who I presumed was Kayla. She told us the tale she was about to weave, the tale of a lawyer who disappeared and was never heard from again, leaving behind a teacher and his pregnant wife. She told the story deftly, but the writing was amateurish and repetitive at times. She laid out the facts and even mentioned the clown that was arrested during the search and the slaughtered pets in the sewers. It was so surreal to hear it this way. Parts of my life dramatized and played out for entertainment. She was reaching a crescendo, building into a climax, and I must admit, I was drawn in and sitting at the edge of my seat. I could see where this was heading. She performed a bit of a radio play, narrating a late evening where the wife receives a mysterious call at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's when it hit me. The overwhelming sense of déjà vu. The call occurred on the YouTube video and was exactly the same call that I had heard almost 5 years ago. The call that Amy had recorded and played back to me. You can self-admit to a mental hospital. They're not going to come and take your guns away. You can tell your shrink the most god-awful things, and your guns will remain safely tucked away, untouched and unconfiscated. Maybe I should have had mine taken away. I found him easily. He was living in the city, staying in one of these hip, new, overpriced apartments that had been erected in some historic district east of downtown. I approached him from behind in the parking lot and buried my .357 in the small of his back. Let's not make this difficult. I just want to talk, Connor, I hissed from behind him. What, who? He stammered. Walk to your apartment just like normal. I'll be right behind you. If you run, I'll drop you. You got that? I told him. Yes, he stammered. I followed him across the parking lot and up a flight of stairs. They ended in a second-story landing where his apartment was. We entered, and then I turned on the lights and told him to sit on the couch. Keeping a bead on him, I stepped to the side and grabbed a chair from his kitchen table. I sat across from him. You're that cop, he gasped. Correct. Do you know why I'm here? No, he said. I'm here about Dennis Burrow. I'm here about your girlfriend, Kayla. I'm here about the tattoo on the back of her neck. The same one that her friend Lisa has. Since we have a history, I figured I'd ask you a few questions first. I've already told you all those things years ago, everything that happened, he said. No, not everything. We have a witness. Even as someone that had been through lots of masochism, his threshold for pain was quite low. I guess not having a safe word would do that to you. It didn't take him long to talk. He and Kayla had split up a couple of years ago. He stated that the events that had transpired between the two of them was a constant battle, an obstacle that they could never get past. They did still keep in contact, though. Lisa and Kayla were both in the guild or whatever. They were friends since way back. Of course, Lisa saw Dennis run by one day when she was visiting. She said that she worked with him. Started asking all sorts of questions about how often he ran and all of this stuff. Connor said. Go on, I prodded him. Well, she and Lisa, they went off somewhere without me and they got to talking. They were big into this Lovecraft mumbo-jumbo stuff. I just sort of played along sometimes. Lisa had somehow started dating this rich lawyer guy and he was all over her and she really sucked him in. Got him to spend a bunch of money and everything. They started having these parties and get-togethers. There was this one particular party though. I didn't find all of this out until much, much later, I swear. Anyways, something happened at this party. Have you ever heard of the Lost Lovecraft? He asked. I can't say that I have. Well, it's this fabled manuscript of his that has never been published. Supposedly within it there was this ritual to summon an actual elder god. They claimed to have found it, paid big money for it. They were going to perform the ritual with this big client. I'm guessing that it didn't work, seeing how there is no big Cthulhus roaming our fair city, I said. Right, but whatever they did, Dennis didn't like it, and I think they were afraid of him talking. I wanted no part of this. They said they just needed my house. They would get him in the garage, all friendly-like. Jay, Dennis's boss, would be there. Kayla, she wanted to watch. Her morbid curiosity and all of that. Her obsession with true crime. I stayed outside the whole time, just started walking away from the house and I kept walking. What about the recording? The phone call to Amy. How did you all get a hold of it? Well, he begged to call his wife. Kayla offered to let him record his voice, a message. She doctored it up and used a third-party app through the computer to make the call. Y'all are all effed up, I said. I know, he said as he started to cry. Lisa and Jay, are they still together? No, I haven't heard. They stayed together a long time. You know, he left his wife for her and they moved in together. But the last I heard is that they were on the outs. Okay, I'm gonna sit here while you type up a statement. Everything you know. And everything you saw that happened. If you don't, I'm going to put one in your knee. Can you think of anything else to tell me? I said. Well, they're going to try the ritual again on the 20th. Lisa asked if I wanted to come to see that this was all worth it. Where are they doing this? I asked. At the mansion. On the evening of the 20th, I started out where I had those 4 years ago. The mansion stood off in the distance, completely banal. There was a mystery for me this time. The night was quiet. The front door was unlocked. The lights in the foyer were on, and before me, at the dead center of the room on the floor where the nautical compass had been, was an opening. I approached and kneeled towards it. A ladder descended into the darkness below. I got a sturdy grip and I lowered myself down. I found myself standing in a low-ceilinged corridor. The walls and the floors were concrete, and I could only barely make them out in the flickering lights of the candles that sat on wooden pillars lining the walls. The corridor went before me about 40 feet or so, and then opened up into a darkness that I could not see the details of from this distance. I had both my .357 and my 9mm Beretta with me. There was an extra magazine for the Beretta that I could reload inside of 1.5 seconds. I wasn't going to go down easy. I could hear a low level of noise, voices. They hummed along in a repetitive cadence. I crept forward until I reached the opening and ducked behind a pillar. It was a square room filled with more candles arranged in a circular pattern. At the back stood two figures in robes, heads down and hoods drawn. They were reading from a leather-bound journal. The voices were feminine as they continued their low chant in a foreign language that I could not discern. In the middle of the circle sat a naked man, the floor painted with what I can only assume was his blood. The dark liquid on the floor was painted into some sort of symbol, a circle with intersecting lines. Blood ran down his thigh. Wrapped around his body was the large Burmese python, a thick golden cable. They were entwined like lusty limber lovers on a lazy afternoon. His hands were tugging at the tightness at what was left of his neck. His head had vanished into the unhinged jaw of the snake. I stepped forward, gun drawn. Before I could say or do anything, a large hand closed over my shoulder and squeezed. It pushed me aside with an ease that felt insulting, and the owner of the hand stepped forward. Past the circle of candles, past the man and the snake on the floor, and towards the two figures. The tall, gray man. He wore what looked like coveralls and a gray trucker's cap, the details of which were shapeless and indefinable. The robed gals began to get louder and louder in their chants, throwing their hoods back and looking at each other in disbelief and fear. Kayla and Lisa. A large rectangle of light appeared between them, blinding me momentarily and causing my eyes to fill with spots. I stood frozen, only able to watch. The tall gray man gestured towards the rectangle of light, which had now dimmed and had the appearance of an opening to an outside area illuminated by sunlight. I could see a sea of tall grasses waving in a breeze and a pink sky. It seemed to be a rift in the very fabric of our present reality, an exit. Kayla and Lisa looked at each other, embraced, and then joined hands and stepped towards the portal. The tall gray man followed them. I raced forward to see, but a brilliant light and a forceful blast of heat knocked me backwards. When I stood up, they were gone, and the portal was closed. I made an anonymous call to the station from a payphone at a convenience store, and yes, they still make those. You just have to know where to find them. I advised them to get animal control. If they hurried, they would be able to find the body of J. McDougal before the snake fully digested him. It would end up one of those blurbs that you read the headlines of, published for the sheer shocking nature of it all. Local man killed by his own pet snake. Headlines shared on Facebook and snake puns in the comments section. Herpetology aficionado dorks weighing in on the proper handling of snakes and other deadly reptiles. If they only knew the half of it. Epilogue. On any given day, during any given moment, is someone thinking about you, missing you. A friend reminiscing about something funny that you said one time. A lover yearning for your presence. A parent thinking of your well-being, or a child wondering where you are. It doesn't have to be something positive either. The cashier at the grocery store whom you creeped out when you tried to make a joke. The suspect you arrested on a bogus drug charge. Or the person whose life you ruined when you acted on impulse. The dreams you've haunted with your selfish decision. Do you ever leave your cell phone somewhere for hours and hours at a time, only to return and find not one missed call or text? Does it sting you just a little bit like it used to do me? David Eagleman once wrote that there are 3 deaths. The first is when the body ceases to function. The second is when the body is consigned to the grave. The third is that moment, sometime in the future, when your name is spoken for the last time. It's not a new concept. The idea that we only live after death as long as someone else remembers us. Since revisiting this case, I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be forgotten, erased. Maybe by writing everything up here, I'm doing my small part to preserve Dennis and his memory, to save him from his second or third death for just a little while longer. As he roams the streets of Purgatory or wherever the hell he is, maybe he has just a little while longer, as long as we're discussing him. Him, the victim of a cruel and random universe. Why did this case burrow, no pun intended, into my psyche the way that it did? People get away with murder all the time. The world keeps spinning. I must admit that I feel a little bit of a kindred spirit with good old Dennis. In the sense that, as of now, no one would be around to mourn me when I'm gone. I've burned too many bridges in my life. It might be time to start building some new ones. Either that, or I can continue to study the leather-bound journals that I confiscated from the scene before I left. I could perform this ritual. Me and the tall guy, we're a little familiar with each other. What would it be like to go through that doorway and see the other side? To be disappeared and forgotten? Well, I'm keeping my options open.